Well, that was totally worth all the build-up. What an absolutely exciting, explosive finale that captures the grittiness of what we were promised. Cassian, now returning to his home planet for his mother's funeral, finds himself in the middle of what is the start of the rebellion. It was a nice little touch that Mon Mothma's driver eavesdropped on her conversation and is possibly a spy for the Empire. And also that the people marching through the streets with their trumpets as we build up to the first rebellion battle that we know of in this timeline. That was exciting. I was on the edge of my seat like, okay, what's going to happen? We're building up to something. What's going to happen? And it's cool how even in death, Marva stirs up the emotions of the citizens to rebel against the Empire. And, the climax of this episode kind of reminded me of the end of Mockingjay with what happens to President Snow, because one of the villains in this episode has a very similar fate. It's almost like a mirror of what happens to President Snow in Mockingjay. And then there's also the post-credit scene where we learn exactly what it was that the prisoners on Narkina 5 were building. Panels for the Death Star. Nice little touch, nice little way to tie that back in. Now, overall, I enjoyed the show, but it did seem a bit unfocused. Much like Rings of Power, which I also enjoyed, there were a lot of characters and plot lines to keep track of. Because the first episode, and I've said this a few weeks back, but I'm going to say it again now, the first episode was about Cassian looking for her sister. That plotline kind of got dropped. And then it was about forming a rebellion for a couple of episodes. And then we spent a good chunk of time doing a Prison Break story. And then on top of that, we have all these side plots about Mon Mothma and Luthen and various Imperial officers. And there were a lot of characters to keep track of. There were a lot of plot lines to process in this show, which I think was kind of a huge weak point. So I still enjoyed its grittiness. I still enjoyed its maturity. It's some of the best Star Wars we've ever gotten. And it is very different than typical Star Wars, which worked in its favor. And it is some of the best Star Wars. But I do think that in Season 2, the writers need to hone their focus in a bit more. Because at times it seemed like the show didn't really have a plan. It seemed like they were just kind of making stuff up as they went along. Still a great show. I just hope that Season 2 is a bit more simple. It's a bit more tight. It feels like we actually know well, I don't want to say we feel like we know where it's going, because I want to be surprised, but I want it to feel like it doesn't have a bazillion plot lines going on. I hope that they realize this had a little bit of an Iron Man 2 problem, and that we actually, when we introduce a plot line, we follow through with it. So that was a little bit of a detriment to this. But I still enjoyed the show. Overall, Cassian Andor, the show for me, gets a B, an 8 out of 10, and a 4 out of 5 stars.